Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of BiblioTech on Air, BiblioTech's official podcast. I'm Lewis.
I'm Ruby.
And today we are joined by the lovely Michelle, back on the podcast again. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me again.
We love having you on. And today we are going to be covering the novel Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry. And just a brief synopsis. Wilhelm von Thor is dying. As he looks back on his life, he reflects on his youth in Dresden, his grandmother, and his medical career during World War II. But mostly, he remembers his darling Lucy, the dark-haired beauty promised to him years before they met. Though only together for a few months, Wilhelm knows their love is written in the stars, and he ensures that her death is only the beginning. But through the cracks in Wilhelm's story, there is another voice, that of Gabriella, who speaks of her fearless sister and the madman who robbed her from the grave. So, yeah. This book is, obviously, by the summary, there's going to be a lot of, disturbing topics kind of in here. It has a lot to do with, death and, kind of gothic romance. And also, we'll get into it. But, take heed, just in case any of that might be uncomfortable. But yeah, kind of getting into it. What was y'all's kind of overall reaction to the novel? Did y'all find it disturbing, thought-provoking? Because it was I didn't know this until you mentioned it and until my partner had mentioned it to me in more detail, but it is actually based on a real story. So
Yeah. So the story is actually inspired by a German doctor in 1930s Florida. His name was Karl Tanzler, if it's German. And then he was obsessed with a young Cuban patient, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. And it became a sensational story where he had her corpse, took care of her after she died. I believe he put wax on her face to conserve her features and whatnot. And eventually they found her body and they found what he was doing. I don't remember what the conclusion of the true story though was.
to my knowledge, just from what my partner had looked up and told me about it yesterday, it was apparently very similar to how in the book he goes on trial and is later just seen as a poor romantic who was doing everything he could for the love of his life, and he'd only gone just crazy through love and stuff like that. He was the actual Karl Tanzler was, I don't remember if he was found guilty Wilhelm in the book, but either way, he was still seen publicly as oh, he's just some poor romantic, stuff like that.
Which is awful. And we'll get more into that because there's so much to say about that. But
yeah, knowing that it's based off of a true story, how was y'all's opinion of this version of it? Because it's relatively faithful to a lot of details of the actual story. The nationalities of the characters mirror those of the actual people. The kind of setup of Luciana in the book dying of tuberculosis, being treated by Wilhelm, and then later him taking her to his home and just spending his life with her and trying to in the book it's definitely he's trying to revive her specifically. But how did y'all feel about the way that this went about it?
I think it's crazy because you mentioned too that the fact that the reason why this all started was that Wilhelm had a very close relationship with his grandmother, and when his grandmother passed, he saw a vision of his grandmother holding the hand of a little girl and was telling him, this is who you're going to be destined to be with. This is your future. And you said that was real, as well, right? That yes, actually did happen to Karl.
In the actual case, he does claim that he was visited by an apparition who also showed him a girl who looked strikingly like how Luciana is described in the book. And promised that like this was who he was destined to be with, you know?
I think it makes me so sick. Like when I first started the book, knowing that it was based on a true story and knowing like the way that Gabriella starts off too, she's like, devils are real. Like they live amongst us in this world. I don't believe anything this guy says, or like everything that he says is like, I'm going to be the one to tell you the real story, the real side of the story. So like every time that it came to his part, I was just sick. Like just reading the way his thoughts were, reading, you know, like even though it starts off with his tragic backstory, like of how his mother was not very motherly towards him. It was more his grandmother that cared for him, and that he had to eventually care for his grandmother as well when she was dying, and she passed away, and he like stayed with the dead body as well.
Right.
Like all of that was very touching, I guess, but still in that I was just like, I was just so sick reading through his parts. I was just trying so hard to get through it because I'm like, nothing that this guy can go through or say will like change the fact that I think will justify anything that he eventually does in the rest of the story.
So I found this story, particularly the take on it, to be interesting because it explores the idea of colonialism of female body by this idea of well-intended men. So kind of like the savior complex in a bit. So you think about it, what was going on in 1930s around the world, and even what was going on in the States. And you look at that and you compare it to just what she's trying to push into it. So this idea of a race and the idea that the doctor had this privilege because one, he was white, he was German, he was a man. He left his post-war Germany in order to conceal his research. That was why he left. And then with Gabrielle, her family left Cuba for political reasons. Because of the revolution. They were trying to find safety. They didn't leave because they were trying to explore research, which is something that can happen through privilege. So I think that was a very interesting idea that made me question the idea of where's the line of when a man is the privilege of what a man has versus a woman, and especially an age difference too.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
I think that reminds me too how much he victimized himself when he was like, I'm an immigrant. You know, he's like, how dare you talk to an immigrant man like this? Because he was pretending to be Polish, trying to hide his German heritage. Yeah. But he was like, man, I'm an immigrant. How dare you like accuse me, when people were like, let me see your paperwork. Like some things aren't adding up. Like you're Polish, but you don't know any Polish, you know, things like that. Yeah. And then the way that he would speak about Polish people too was very hateful. He was disgusted by them.
Yeah. And it's so evident of the fact that like he gets indignant about the fact that like anyone would try to like find him out and be like, oh, you're not actually Polish, are you? And he's like, no, how dare you question me as an immigrant? Yet it's also, he exploits the fact that, you know, the Madrigal family, where Luciana and Gabriella are from, they don't have money. You know, they've moved to Florida from Cuba, and they are extremely like in hard times, and they have to do a lot of stuff to like make ends meet and stuff like that. And not only does he like look down on them for like the ways that they make their money, but he's exploiting them in order to get to Luciana, specifically because he's like, I know that they will let me do whatever I want to get closer to this woman that I am like absolutely going to spend the rest of my life with, because they have no other option of treating her tuberculosis. So I'm going to like basically extort them by being like, I'm giving my services for free, you know? And he, you know, he has the audacity to be like, you know, it's really hard being a German, like having to give up my nationality because of the way people look at me, but then doesn't bat an eye whenever he is like looking at like Cuban American people and being like, oh, they're lesser than, you know, like it's many such cases.
So I read an article last night, and it featured Heather Parry. She was answering questions, a Q&A type of thing. She explored in it the American dream and how this idea of, quote, land of privilege inspired her to write a bit of this, those connections. And her idea that she really wanted to express in it was that this land of privilege or this American dream is not always distributed equally. So I think that's a perfect example of him looking down on other people and him showing, hey, I have, how do you say it, the assets to take care of her. You don't. Give me her. Of course, they're going to say yes because they want her to survive. They want her to be healthy. And they don't have the education in a way, a science background, I guess you can say, to understand what's truly going on, to know his poisonous intention, I suppose you can say.
Yeah. And like they definitely do like suspect like things are up, like they know something's wrong, but they are just left without a choice. You know, even Luciana, who in Wilhelm's mind, whenever he's treating her, is like acquiescing to like his proposal and everything that like he wants, is just being like this sweet demure girl who like sometimes acts out, but like, you know, she's doing it because she's scared of dying. In reality, she's like, she knows what's happening. She knows the ways that she's being like exploited by him and like, you know, like not given her autonomy. And she like, you know, is like, there's gotta be literally any other way that I can be treated. I would rather die than like have this man be my savior. She like has like a ring that was given to her by her grandmother, and like throws it at him being like, dude, just take this. It is all I have. This is your payment. Leave me alone and leave my family alone. And he, in his twisted mind, is like, she gave me a ring, so she wants to get married. And it's so disturbing that like all of them know what's going on, but none of them have the power to stop it, even though it's happening in their home. It's and for Luciana, it's happening to her and to her body, and she has no power. It made me so sad. The parts too where the mother, like, because Gabriella and the siblings are like more understanding of what's going on, more against it, more trying to prevent him from keep on caring for Luciana. But the mom is like, no, like this is our only chance. Like he needs to keep continuing to watch over her. And then even after she passes, and then the mom did believe that she believed Wilhelm saying that they had, him and her daughter had a relationship with each other. So much to where she died, the mom went to Wilhelm and was like, gave him flowers and was like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like y'all's relationship with each other. Like, I can't imagine how you must feel. I was like, oh my God, girl. I will say, small correction. It was not flowers. She gave him her hair. Oh, her hair. In a flower box. Which, you know, he can be totally trusted with. Anyway, so kind of like, I love how much that we like covered just there, because like this book does have like a lot of like rich themes and like it has a lot to say. I will say we've been talking about the doctor and Wilhelm, and he does kind of speak from a very like not in this reality. He is very much like in his own head of like, everything that I am doing is super justified, and like in the name of love. Did y'all's perception of him change at all through the book? Because I know that we all did not like this man and we did not like the things that he's saying, but like, was there legitimately any point where you were like, maybe I could relate to that if I were like in enough grief, or like, you know?
So I'm somebody who tries to be compassionate, and that comes with a fault, especially when reading books where it's an unreliable narrator. I kind of did. At the beginning of it, I did feel bad for Wilhelm because I saw it through his narration, through his idea, his ideology, his belief, his justification. And then I started listening more, or not listening, but reading Gabriella's point of view and her take on it. And remember stopping and being like, what are you doing, girl?
Yep.
I mean, like, the mind is just such a powerful thing, and like, obviously this guy is not mentally well. Like, he has some issues, and like, people believe their own realities, you know, like, that's just, there's nothing that can change that. Unfortunately, that's like the kind of cards that are dealt with. But it's just, it's crazy to hear, like, I don't know, it makes me think of like stalkers and like hearing stories of that, where it's like these stalkers believe that they have relationships and ties to these people. Like, in their mind, something entirely different is going on.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And there's no like justifying that in, I guess, the real world or in reality.
Yeah. And there's just like, there is something to be said about the fact that like he was predisposed to have like delusions of entitlement to this girl, you know, because as we were talking about, he has some social status. Sure, he has to give it up in a way whenever he moves to America in order to like escape prejudice, but he's able to do this extremely easily with the resources he has, with like the stipends he's getting from like Europe and stuff like that. Like, because of his class, his age, his nationality, well, you know, his race, he is able to like have enough life experience where he doesn't even think about it when he's like, oh, I'm entitled to this girl. She was the one who was promised to me. At no point does he even stop to think like, no, she's not, you know, like maybe this isn't the girl I was thinking of, or maybe, you know, she's like 19 and I'm like 50 something, and maybe I missed my chance. Like, he is so in his own head about how much he deserves in this life, that, and like how brilliant he is, that he doesn't even think about the fact that he might be wrong. Yeah. You know?
It's like a disconnect from reality because of, let's say he has a mental health issue.
Which honestly,
he probably
to some extent.
Yeah. Like, if it's not narcissism, it's probably something else. So yeah, you think about it, and you think about like when somebody has narcissism, or when somebody is a narcissist, and how easy it is for somebody in that relationship at first who isn't familiar with dealing with those types of personality traits to be easily influenced by them and controlled and manipulated. So
yeah. Turning to the title of Orpheus Builds a Girl, you know, Orpheus is a very, you know, popular myth, and it does deal with sort of like the grief that comes from losing your love. But instead of what happens in Orpheus and Eurydice's case, where like he is just kind of forced to like go live his life because he's lost her forever and he has to like kind of deal with the grief of death, this kind of takes on a more like sort of Frankenstein sort of flavor to it, where he is like trying to defy that, and like in his grief he finds justification to rebuild and revive and resurrect Luciana, you know? Yeah. And kind of in the vein of like old romantic stories that maybe, you know, if you look at a little bit closer and you're like, no, that's still messed up that he did that, or like that, you know, how do you all feel it kind of like ties in with those kind of like older romances?
I think it changes my thoughts and ideas on them, like going into like Wuthering Heights, like it was like, oh yeah, this big great romantic story, even like with the movie, but then like when you're looking at it closer, it's like, no, this is not like a romantic story. Like, these people were pretty messed up, you know? So it makes me like look back on previous stories. Like, I think that's what Heather Parry's trying to get across too. Like, they're not all gothic romances. Like, there's dark stuff happening there. I don't know.
It makes me reflect on Jane Eyre, because Jane Eyre was all about her being an individual, and her, yes, she had a desire for this man. Oh my God, I forgot his name.
I've never read it.
I never read
Oh my God, Jane Eyre's so good. So Mr. Rochester. So she loves him, you know, towards the end of the book, but she has such pride that she's not willing to bend over for him, I guess you can say. But there's so many different flaws in it when you think about it. The age difference, the fact that he hid his marriage, his first marriage from her, that he has like an angry attitude about him, entitlement and stuff like that. And I remember reading it and thinking, girl, you can do so much better.
Yeah.
And
No, definitely.
This is quite an example of that, is that Jane Eyre is sort of presented in a romanticized idea because of the time that it was released. Yet now, it's aged quite well, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like that, where kind of like Beauty and the Beast, Stockholm syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like Orpheus and like all those Greek myths too, where it's like they went to fight for their promised wife or whatever, like creating a whole war to steal like Helena back or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's like looking back on that, it's like bro, that's not romance.
Yeah. No, it's just like there is like, here's my thing with this book. I did not know for half of the book that this was based on a true story. I hadn't even read the back of the book. I went straight into it. So whenever I was going into it, I kind of expected it to follow kind of a path of other Gothic stories I've read, where actually this man and this woman were married. Maybe they weren't happy, maybe they were. But like she ends up dying, and it's kind of going to explore like, oh, what could a man in that scenario do, like in order to like try to counteract the grief. I've read a lot of stories like that where it is very much like the, and like that's like an action movie trope also, where it's like, oh, here's this man whose like wife died, and the only reason that she was a character is so she could die to motivate him to like go fight, like that is a common trope. But like reading the book, he only knows her for a couple of months. She is really, really displeased with the whole arrangement for the entire time. And like, not knowing that it was based on a story, I was like, something about the way that his perspective is written, if you were like looking for something romantic in that, on purpose, he frames everything with kind of like rose tinted glasses and is like, you know what, like this was actually destined and I love her very, very much. And then you look at the objective facts of everything and you're just like, oh, no, this is only going on for a few months. He's extorting this family. And then you look at the actual real case and you're like, I can no longer even think about this in a way where it's like, I could romanticize this if I blocked out 90% of what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, whenever it ties so closely, like, it reminds me of Bright Young Women, the book that we read for Libros, which was a kind of like this sort of thing, but for the Ted Bundy cases, where it is based on them very heavily, and it follows a lot of similar beats to what happened, and especially how those killers were treated in the media and stuff like that. And I love that this book does offer the perspective of, the women in the scenario, the victims in the scenario, and like subverts a lot of like the Gothic romance stuff where we only hear it from the person who's afflicted.
I mean, it gets into that too. Like towards the end, it shows when Wilhelm is eventually put on trial against the family, and the general public starts siding with him, starts romanticizing, being like, man, this poor husband lost his wife.
Yeah.
Why is the family keeping him from like just doing what, like, it's just a body, like just let him do what he wants to like deal with his own grief, so much so that people, like women, started visiting his jail cell and being like, wow, your story is so romantic. I wish my husband cared for me the way you care for Luciana. Things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't, like, people can romanticize anything. Like, people romanticize serial killers. People write letters to them. Like, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
It sort of brings this question, I guess you can say, too, the way she frames his unreliable narration of what's going on in their relationship. It sort of frames it in an idea where you sort of question, let's say, marriage, for example. So you're obviously hoping, how do you say it? Like, I'm devoted to you no matter what. When death comes and it takes one of us, how will we react? And our sanity too is another thing. But it also shows, like in this situation, because she's a female, it shows that she loses her agency over her body, but it creates this warped idea of looking on it in a viewpoint of, okay, they're married. Where's the boundary of, okay, you should leave your wife alone and let her rest in peace.
Yeah.
Like a normal couple, I guess you can say, in death or whatnot. But yeah, it sort of gives you as a reader this line of, where is that boundary?
Yeah.
When it comes to relationship.
And like, I know that we touched on it, but the with the outcome of the trial in the book, there's a lot of factors that kind of go into like why he was, found guilty, but only given like a fee, which for him, being as rich as he was kind of a slap on the wrist. But the public opinion of him, even knowing what he had done, like the fact that it ends up kind of like favorable towards him and that people are like, kind of fawning over him and stuff like that and being like, oh, I wish my husband treated me like that way. Like, what do y'all think about that and like why that sort of thing would happen?
I feel like unfortunately it still happens to this day. It's like people see an image of a person and they can like just like defend, they can defend anyone to the death if you really want to. And it just surprised me, especially when the priest was visiting him and the priest was like, even Wilhelm was like, wow, I'm surprised. Like, I'm not religious. Like, why is this priest, visiting me? And the priest is like, can you tell me more about your experimentation? Like, how far did you go? And then Wilhelm is explaining that, like, I went as far as to where she was bleeding. She started her menstrual cycle.
Right.
Like, that's how close, like, she was coming back to life. And the priest was so intrigued about that and was like, wow, you did that? Like, that's like Jesus, like, that you did such a like miraculous thing, that just
It's
truly disgusted me. Like,
it's interesting because I think it's one of the main themes in this novel, the power dynamic of a female and a male, particularly in this time. I'm assuming he's light complected, he's white. He has an accent, but I'm sure his accent is easier to understand to some people during that time than other types, like from Latin America. And I think also, too, when you think about it, like the 1930s, there's a lot of discovery in medicine and whatnot and science. And so if you have a white male who he's 60, 50 around this novel or so, if you have a young doctor that comes to you and says like, hey, I found new research, you're probably going to be very enthusiastic about it. And on top of that, at the end of the novel, the compassion from the community, I think the reason why it's so heavy from the community is just the fact of appearance. He was an older white man. He was, I believe, in his 70s towards the end of the book.
Yes.
And towards his death. We tend to think of older men, even older people, but older men who were like 70s, 80s, we sort of say like, oh, pobrecito, he's so cute. But you don't think about the history of that person. They can be a serial rapist, they could have killed children. And we see it, and because of society are told he is harmless.
Right.
And so because of that, I think a lot of it is his stigma, but it works positively for him. But the stigma of, that old man can't do any harm.
And like the medical research part of it too. Like I'm now remembering the group of doctors who like wrote a letter to him and all signed it and were like, wow, you did such a great thing. We're going to like, I don't know, dedicate this research to you or give you money. And like this research needs to be continued, something like that. I was like, I don't know. It's like, where do we draw the line in that as well with medical research?
A lot of where this book kind of draws its horror from, other than the infatuation that Wilhelm has for Luciana, is also just kind of like the process of like death, and the process of decay. And like, at what point is it like very like is it desecration to take someone out of their grave? Is it desecration to like, is like the mortuary and like industry kind of like making up the body and like going in and being invasive to a corpse to make them look pretty for the funeral's sake? Is that desecration? And also just kind of like you know, obviously all of the stuff that Wilhelm does to Luciana's body in order to try to like preserve her appearance or try to like heal her from all of the states of decay that she's made her way into. I find that particular thing fascinating, but also very horrific because it does bring up that sort of, you know, like what is, it really depends on culture to culture, but like what is the most respectful way to like tend to our dead? What, like, sure, to their wishes, but like also is a body just a thing, or is it like a symbol of that person on that remains on earth? You know,
I mean, oh no,
sorry. No. So yeah, like to go back on that with it is just a body. So Queen Elizabeth just died recently, not like recently, you know, she died. We had her body on display. People went to visit it. Is that not odd?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the same thing happens in this book when like after the trial, or during the trial, when it wasn't really concluded what to do with her body, she's kind of just kept in the back of the morgue, like still in her coffin, but just upright, literally in the back. And the morgue starts selling tickets for people to go see her while the trial is still going on. And it's like the family is just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But everyone else is just so curious and so involved in this trial. Yeah, like that they just want to go see a dead body.
Yeah. And you know, kind of along that line, Gabriella has a very fascinating moment in here where she kind of reflects on the fact of like, yeah, people will spread gossip like it's just a story to tell. Yeah. You know, they will soften it. They will, you know, make up their own details. Like gossip gets spread around and the truth of the matter does not always like ring through, especially whenever they're only hearing Wilhelm's side of the story and not Gabriella's, or especially not Luciana's, you know, and it's just like, it's almost like the argument people make of like true crime of like
there's a disconnect.
There's like a disconnect where we can enjoy that as like a story or like as a ghost story, something like that, and we can have that morbid curiosity and that fascination that would lead people to like go look at the desecrated corpse of this poor girl, you know, just for entertainment or for you know, fulfilling the sort of like dark side that we have. I personally think it has a lot to do with the way that we personally treat death in our culture, like, or at least like American, like USA American culture, as like this sort of like, it is a taboo topic. And like, you know, there are very specific ways that we do things. So kind of having that like interaction with death be so limited or taboo in a lot of ways can lead us to have that morbid curiosity and wanting to fulfill that through things like true crime, through things like, you know, hearing this sort of thing and being like, I wonder what the body looks like, you know? You recommended this for us to talk on the podcast a bit ago, but it was also just the Libros, it was also a Libros book recently, Tender as a Flesh, where it's like, there are very, very horrific ways, like very visceral ways that we can compare what is being done towards like in terms of like legislation against women in general, against bodily autonomy across the board, you know, like there are so many visceral, horrific metaphors that can be used to symbolize this very real thing that is going on. Yeah. You know, that like it's, you know, especially like having read, like watched the show that you said that kind of tackles like where we're saying like the gothic sort of romances and the ways that can twist if you kind of look at it a different perspective, and reading like feminist theory at the exact same time. Like this book is really good at delivering its horror through not just the fact that like, yes, he's trying to reanimate a corpse and he gets like little intimate with the corpse, and that is inherently a taboo and freaky thing, but also all of what it symbolizes of like her loss of autonomy and his entitlement and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it gets all there. Like I'm thinking too at the point where she starts menstruating and he looks at it as a sign that he should start procreating with her. Like, wow, she's menstruating. This is a miracle. I need to create life with her now. And it's like, that's just always how women are being seen.
And and I feel that this book is a great way that shows this idea of women, just women in general, women being objectified, women being commodified and politicized whatever. Sorry. But, like we have no autonomy over it. And this is our body. I think it allowed me to question a lot more other things on an ethical manner.
If you've made it through and this does not seem like something that's going to disturb you in a way that's very substantial, go for it. So if it does sound like something that you're interested in, and if you have a BiblioTech library card, if you're a resident of Bexar County, you can check out Orpheus Builds a Girl on cloudLibrary as an ebook and an audiobook. And I do genuinely recommend it. I would give this book, like, personally, an 8 out of 10, just because, like, I don't know if I'm going to be revisiting it anytime soon, but in what it does achieve, it really, really does, like, hit home very viscerally, like, what sort of things it's trying to be commentary on,
Yeah.
How about y'all? How would you rate it?
Probably, 10 out of 10. Like, I hated it, truly hated it to the core when I was first reading it. But now reflecting, looking back on it, it was very well written. Like, I don't know, maybe 9 out of 10. I'm gonna still spew on my hate for a little bit. I have to.
Yeah.
I would say 9 out of 9. I wouldn't say 10 out of 10 because I found it disturbing. And my favorite type of horror is like the horror that can actually happen.
Right.
So, it obviously did happen. But I'll give it a 9 out of 10 because there were some spots in the story that were a little slow or questionable. But I think Heather Parry did a really great job.
Seriously.
Emphasizing these themes that she wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that just about wraps it up for our discussion of Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry. Again, if you want to check it out, we have it on cloudLibrary as an ebook and an audiobook with your BiblioTech library card. And join us on the next episode. I'm Lewis.
I'm Ruby.
And I'm Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.